On the phone, we have hilarious comedian Mark Unger. He's the star of Stage and Screen. You can see him in a recurring role on Veep on HBO. He also hosts a radio show out of Baltimore. He hosts the Fighting Ungers podcast, which you can find at fightingungers. Is it Fighting Ungers what?
FightingHungers.com.
There you go, .com. Check it out. Also on the phone, we got Frank Cana from Mystery Science Theater 3000 in the studio with me, Steph Zamorano, the host of Comedy and Everything Else. And so now I'm sure you all are familiar with the standoff that happened with the Cliven Bundy. Cliven, that's his name, Cliven. Isn't that a weird name?
Cliven, Mrs. Lady.
With the lady and the thing with the hitting and the hot and the glasses and the thing and prednisone. Okay, so... So now what I want to do is I want to talk about how the news covered this situation, right? Because I was watching NBC Nightly News, and they had a fill-in for Brian Williams. He was out doing a sketch for late night TV, and I think he was doing his teaching his improv class at the UCB. And
he devotes a lot of his time to being a good sport.
yes, he does. So I'm watching it, and now, headlines are reductive. That's just how they are. The way a news piece is reduced to a headline is very telling of the news source, right? Like, for instance, the New York Times might cover Obamacare with a headline like 7.1 million enroll in Affordable Care Act. Whereas Fox News might cover that same story with a headline like, the Benghazi nightmare continues, right? So here's another instance of that, right? So I'm watching here's how NBC covered the Clive Bundy standoff with the feds.
Standoff between a Nevada rancher and armed supporters on one side and the federal government on the other.
See, no, it's not. That's not the way it is. Let me hear it. Let's have him say it again.
Standoff between a Nevada rancher and armed supporters on one side and the federal government on the other.
Yeah, okay, that's not how it is. Yes, there are. I mean, that's how an idiot might see it. Yes, there are federal agents on one side, and there is a rancher on the other side. But chances are you might be an idiot. You become more of an idiot just listening to this news guy, because these aren't armed supporters. These are crazy people who came from all over the country just for a chance at actual gunplay, okay? That's who these people are. You don't even have to explain the story. You just have to put a camera at one of those guys with the guns, and it would explain itself. But maybe it gets better. Let's listen. Maybe he describes it a little bit better. So we're off to a bad start on NBC already.
Well, Jimmy, actually, I think it's reference to the fact that this whole story took place in false equivalency, Nevada. I don't know if you're familiar with that town.
Yes, false equivalency, Nevada is exactly how it happened. This is exactly what this is. He's pretending like there's two equal sides of the story, that they have a grievance. We all know what the story is. Cliven Bundy has been grazing on federal land, his cattle, and not paying his grazing fee. There's no dispute about this. This is what happened, right? He didn't pay it, so he owes $1 million. He went to court. He lost. He appealed. He lost the appeal. This is what this is.
I don't know if you heard in a related story that Chris Christie is worried about paying grazing fees whenever he goes to a salad bar.
I heard he's refused. I heard he's
in a way different tax bracket. That's not grazing fees.
Yeah, well, I heard he had some armed supporters are surrounding a sizzler. That's right. And anyway, so maybe it gets better. Maybe things pick up on the NBC report. Let's see.
At issue, federal authorities say the rancher's cattle are on public land illegally.
Okay, no, it didn't get any better. They don't say. He goes, oh, the federal authorities say. They don't say. If you can't report a fact as a fact, that's what it's not hearsay. This isn't an accusation. Well, the federal authorities say this. Clive Bundy says that. What's the truth? I guess we'll never know. Stop framing it that way. That's not the federal authorities say. The federal authorities say, the land management say, the state says, 2 federal judges say, everybody says. This is a fact. This isn't something someone says, but that's how the guy from NBC wants to... It's unbelievable.
How does Putin factor into all of this?
I'm not sure, but Benghazi's going to come into play too. By the way, this is not what is at the issue. You opposite of a journalist, you on NBC, okay? The Bureau of Land Management was attempting to seize these cattle to recoup 2 decades of unpaid grazing fees amounting to more than $1 million. See, I just said that all in one sentence. That's all it took. One sentence. I said the whole
That's all
thing.
you need to say.
That's all he needs to say. This guy has been grazing his cows on federal land. He owes $1 million in grazing fees. 2 courts have said that. Look, I just said, you have to say, that's all you have to say, NBC guy. But he doesn't say that. Oh, could it get worse? Well, let's see. Let's go to the next clip from the report from NBC.
It's a standoff reminiscent of the old Wild West, pitting the federal government against Cliven Bundy and his family of ranchers.
Oh, yeah, that's it. That's it. It's just like a tiny underdog family just trying to scratch out a living. Right, Mark? When the jackbooted monolith federal government came along and tried to crush them just for amusement. That's what's happening here.
We're just trying to be ourselves and not pay anything for anything, and we just want to have our cattle graze and not pay for any of that grazing. We're just people. We're just people.
I love how the NBC guy he's framing it as if it's like it's romantic, like an old Western standoff.
Yeah.
Right?
I was going to say that I watch a lot of Westerns, and the federal government is always the bad guy. In Shane, it's the federal government coming in. In The Searchers, it's the federal government. It's always the federal government in Western.
Yeah, so what's happening here, Mark, is
Did he say in Webster? So I really didn't hear him.
No, he said Western. He said it's
I
like...
thought he said Webster.
No, it's like an awesome... that they're making...
That's also the plot of
Webster.
That is also the plot of most Webster
I'm
episodes.
like, what the hell does Alex Karras have to do with all this?
I didn't even know what you were talking about for a minute. Webster? That sitcom from the 80s, ladies and gentlemen.
Serious? I had no idea.
Jimmy, I need a little clarification.
Sure.
Is Cliven Bundy, is he Gary Cooper or John Wayne?
I don't know. Yeah, he's John Wayne if John Wayne didn't pay his grazing fees and owed $1 million and then took a gun and aimed it at the feds when they came. He's
close to the John Wayne Gacy, actually.
Yeah, yes. He's more like John Wayne Gacy. It's a real awesome Western, the NBC frames it. It's a sexy and entertaining way of presenting the story. That's why they're doing it. It's a sexy and entertaining way, even though
I think the Western they're referring to is Once Upon a Time in Bullshit.
Yes. So let's see how NBC covers that. One more clip.
This dispute dates back more than 20 years. The Bureau of Land Management says the Bundys have failed to pay grazing fees and now owe the government more than $1 million.
Okay, he just did it again. The BLM is saying that Bundy owes them money. That's not saying it. It's a fact. It's an existential fact that he owes the money. This isn't still in dispute. And it wasn't like he failed to pay it. He on purpose said he wasn't going to pay it. This isn't some slip up of paperwork. This isn't a guy who forgot to pay something. This is someone who on purpose for 20 years said he wasn't going to pay it. But this guy from NBC, it's the last thing in the world he could do is ever explain this story coherently or accurately. It's got to be this complete bullshit. This guy's he's a Westerner. This guy's he's fighting the feds and he's got supporters. No, they're all criminals with guns looking for a gunfight with cops. These are what you would call thugs. If they were black or Mexican, you would have dropped a bomb on all of them already. Frank? Yeah. Mark? Anything?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm hearing the phrase grazing fee. And it's really hard to get that worked up about anything that involves grazing.
Yes, but somehow...
I mean, like if it was eating fee, if it was killing fee, but grazing just sounds so pastoral and so passive.
It's almost like a napping fee. It's like he had to pay. I didn't pay my napping fee.
The farming version of like jaywalking.
Yeah.
Grazing fee is something you don't pay.
Yes.
Grazing fee? Are you kidding me? I missed my grazing fee? But if that leads to gunplay or potential gunplay, then jaywalking moves to a much higher level.
Right. Well, here, this guy, the NBC News reporter, at no point even says, like, oh, by the way, this guy went to court twice. The court said that you're a criminal, you're not paying, you have to pay. He appealed it. He lost again. Okay, so it's a very cut and dry case. So that what they do is they bring on a woman from the Land Management Bureau in Nevada, and she says that about the court cases. But let's listen to how strongly she says it. This is the person they got to help explain the story to you on NBC News. Here's the person.
The courts have ruled that his cattle are in trespass. The courts have demanded that he remove his livestock.
That's it. That was all they brought. I don't know. Could you have whispered it maybe? Maybe if you wrote it on the inside of a matchbook cover and flashed it at the lens of the camera. Could you have said that any softer? I'll play it to you one more. Let's listen to it one more
The courts
time.
have ruled that his cattle are in trespass. The courts have demanded that he remove his livestock.
And that's it. That's it. That's the whole thing where they explain it. The courts have ruled, and then the courts have ruled that he must remove his livestock. The courts have ruled. That's how. So okay, let's go to the next clip. Maybe
She sounded the exact same voice who does the emergency message when a bridge is closed.
The bridge is closed.
You know?
the bridge is closed. Please,
Right, exactly, right.
please move towards the center of the vehicle. The doors are closing. Okay, so now maybe they'll wrap it up. Maybe when the NBC guy wraps it up, he'll put a nice button on it and explain everything to us. I don't know. I'm not hoping, but let's see what he says.
Get off our land. Period. Give us back our property.
On social media, they've called it a range war. With each passing day, more and more protesters arrive to support the Bundys, one of them carrying an AK-47.
I'm willing to lay my life down.
Today, with only about half of the 900 cattle rounded up, the BLM ended its operation, citing serious concern about the safety of employees and members of the public. But the war over who controls this range is far from over. Joe Fryer, NBC News.
Mark, is that not hilarious? That is unbelievable. First of all, he goes, "What they're called."
Of course it is.
Of course, this war is far from over. This war is over. This guy's gonna go to jail, and they put a lien on his property. It's it. It's over. This war, as if there's two sides that have a legitimate claim here.
Well, Jimmy, the militia people who showed up, their major concern is they're worried that their small penises are going to be taxed.
Listen, you know what? I want to play this clip again, and let's break it down, because this is the wrap-up, and there's a lot of bad things that happened here, so let's listen.
Get off our land. Period. Give us back our property.
Okay, so that guy believes in property rights? That's what he's saying. You believe in property rights? Really? Then maybe you should just pay your frickin' fee for your property. Okay, let's keep going.
I don't know. You know, I just want to say, like, if he was so invested in that this is property of the people or whatever,
yes,
then why don't they give it back to the Indians?
Oh,
Boy.
I mean, if the Indians showed up in their tribes and wearing tribal garb and, looked
Yes.
aggressive in any manner, right away they would get rid of all the Indians. Oh, they did. Never mind.
Or how about, I'm sure Mexico, that was Mexico at one point, right?
Oh, I understand it to be said Mexico.
Mexico, right? So I guess he'd be like the third guy in line that has property rights to that property. It'd be the American Indian, and then the next would be the Mexicans, and then next would be the federal government, and then it would be Cliven Bundy, right?
What struck me was his first sentence was, according to social media.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
No news story should ever start with, according to social media.
Right. Oh, that's one of the...
Social media becomes the gauge by how we start news and what matters. We're all doomed.
Yeah,
Social media is what it is.
Yes, that's what a great...
It should never find its way into a news story.
Nice, yes, good eye, Mark. As always, NBC answered one of the key questions of journalism. What is Twitter calling this?
Right, exactly.
And by the way, nobody's calling it a range war any more than anyone's called Battleship an action-packed new classic, okay?
Well, they're worried that the range war could break out into a hashtag war.
And then, okay, let's go a little bit more. Let's keep going. Let's see.
On social media, they've called it a range war.
Okay.
With each passing day, more and more protesters arrive to support the Bundys, one of them carrying an AK-47.
Okay, one of them were carrying a AK-47, not like half of them were carrying AK-47s. Like, I don't know, maybe you could show a photograph of the group and all their guns. You know, maybe, seriously, NBC, just read the AP report verbatim, because you're doing a shitty job, okay? One guy had an AK-47. I don't know if you saw the videotape or any other pictures that weren't provided by NBC News, but half of them, they were armed to the teeth.
And also, if the mainstream media like NBC is reporting that it's a war, you can bet that it's a war based on false pretenses.
Yes. Well, here's how Fox News. So I was like, well, I wonder how Fox News is framing this, right? So I went over this is actually, I think, Fox Business News, and it's that Stuart Varney guy who's the worst of the worst. Oh. And listen to how he frames it. Here's what he says about it.
Backing down from that standoff with cattle ranchers in Nevada, the ranchers have not paid, that particular rancher, he's not paid grazing fees in 20 years. So why are the feds standing down?
Oh, Fox News got it right. How could that possibly be? He goes, that particular rancher hasn't paid his fees for 20 years. So why are the feds standing down? The NBC guy didn't even come close to saying anything like that. Over at Fox, who's been totally demagoguing the issue since it started, at least they're reporting it correctly, that this guy is...
But Jimmy, what you missed was the Fox guy blamed it on Obamacare.
Yes, yeah, it was because of Obamacare.
Well, I think I read somewhere that the feds started to slowly get the cattle that was grazing on that land,
yes.
And it escalated. And so what they decided is they started to return the cattle.
Yes.
To graze.
This is true.
So it would not escalate any further. I really don't understand why this guy has had 20 years.
20 years.
20 years to be able to do this.
20 years.
I think a good description of this guy would be he's a free-range douchebag.